Hi guys, my name is Mira Masad. I'm a solutions architect based out of UK. I work with engineering companies. I work with manufacturers and vehicle OEMs. In my spare time, I spend a lot of time thinking about augmented reality, and in this talk, in these 60 minutes or so, we should explore how can we connect those two worlds and how is that useful. Just a show of hands before we start. How many of you actually developed a virtual or augmented reality app? Okay. And how many of you have any of your own definition what the digital twin is? Good. So hopefully after this session we'll have more people raising their hands. So quick look at the agenda, what we will be talking about today. We'll first just try to depict and understand that AR, VR, and 3D is, now not only in gaming, but literally everywhere around us. We'll talk a little bit about digital twin, how that connects to the whole AR, VR, and 3D story. We will then zoom in on our service, Amazon Sumerian, that is a primary component that should help you to build such applications. We will then talk about integrations and how we see augmented and virtual reality be a part of your architecture, but not the entire architecture. It's a component, and our other services can play a part. We'll then move on to design considerations. So when you will be designing your augmented virtual reality app, digital twin, what should you be thinking of? How should you start designing? We'll talk about the build process and what we learned from how our customers are going through that process. And then we'll look at some demo that internally we built, but it's based on what our customers are doing. So it's a very real life example, and it should show you, what the finished product look like. We'll then dive into lessons learned, and there's a lot to learn from what our customers are doing, and you might find it useful when you will be building your own application. So AR, VR, and 3D beyond gaming. So if you look at, this technology, it's now nearly everywhere. If you think about media, entertainment, 360 video, ads, if you think about retail space, being able to position your furniture around your house, just being able to preview whatever you are buying. Construction and architecture, right? A big topic where our customers are building applications where you are able to preview the buildings before actually building them and iterate with their clients on it. And then travel and mobility, being able to teleport yourself anywhere. And hospitality as well. But then we also see a huge spike in other sectors as well. If you think about education, that ability to explain to students in a very interactive way, something to think about. Also, utilizing physics and being actually able to simulate the real world. Automotive, don't only think about configurators, but also think about manuals, guides, how you're using your vehicles, what you're doing in them. As well as actually, you can take it a stretch further and figure out autonomous driving. Actually, AR and VR being simulation of the world, that's what you want to do. That's you have that ability to take it all the way to testing your autonomous driving use cases as being a digital twin. Manufacturing, that's primarily a digital twin. That's why we are here today. This is most of the talk that we will be kind of zooming on this one particular use case. And then healthcare and life sciences, whether that's personal assistant with a face and or it's again some medical simulations there. So digital twins, this is a very simple definition from Wikipedia. I'll read it out loud for you guys. Digital twin is a digital replica of a living or non-living physical entity. By bridging the physical and the virtual world, data is transmitted seamlessly, allowing the virtual entity to exist simultaneously with the physical entity. That's a definition, but let's kind of zoom into it and break it apart and look at individual parts of that definition. So I'm just kind of picking the themes and keywords from that definition. So digital replica, the first keyword. Both living and non-living entities. So digital twin can be, whether that's a non-living entity or actually humanoid. Being able to sustain physical properties. Being able to be bridging worlds between physical and virtual and digital. Simultaneous behavior, being able to actually realize that we're twin and mirror everything that happens in our original to the twin and the other way around as well. And then symbiotic, can those two coexist and how can they improve? How does digital twin improve what's physical? So, very, very simple example of, are these digital twins? We have a couple of photos. There is a chair, toaster, table, person, and then we magically just have this 3D scene assembled in our product Sumerian. Is that what it is? In very, very simple principle, it is. But in this transformation, are we really adhering to all those points that I just mentioned on the previous slide? So let's take a look. So let's think of digital replica. We think that's fine by now, right? If you think of games and realizing that the graphics, textures, resolution is nearly indistinguishable from reality, we think we're there, right? With the living, non-living, physical properties and bridging worlds, we think we could do better in terms of this entire industry. Being able to simulate real human behavior, being able to, in terms of physics, employing real gravity and not just a simple calculation. Bridging worlds. Do we really have a technology right now that is able to bridge the physical and the digital twin in a great latency and in an easy way? So that's yellow. And then there's two red points, simultaneous behavior and symbiotic. And that's where we really see where we can step in as AWS and improve that part of that definition for you. And that's why we think we are the right partners on this journey. So you've seen this slide before. I just wanted to highlight a couple of industries in case you guys are in any of those industries. These are the hottest ones that we see digital twins just growing and flourishing, really. And it only makes sense, right? If you think of construction, buildings, we live in buildings. We're staying in a hotel, all of us. Automotive, we do transportation. We do move from A to B all the time, right? And whether that's automotive today and mobility tomorrow, that's a topic. And then manufacturing, we all own things, right? Some people own more, some people own less, but things are definitely a topic that we see in our customers when they thinking of digital twins. So Amazon Sumerian, our service. This is a definition. I'll again read it out loud for you guys. Sumerian lets you create VR, AR, and 3D applications quickly and easily without any specialized programming or 3D graphics expertise. You can build highly immersive and interactive scenes that run on VR, web, and mobile devices. And if we focus that definition, a couple of topics again to focus on here, right? The first one is VR, AR, and 3D. We're doing all of them. We do not know where the path is going to take you, and we want to make sure you have a tool for all three of them, right? So we are creating tools that allow you to do all of these ways of mixed reality that are out there. Without any specialized programming. We know that many of you might be beginners, right? You are from industrial space. Maybe you care for IoT, definitely care more for IoT than for augmented virtual reality. But we need to give you tools that will enable you to start, and they are easy to use and comprehend. And then these experiences are running on VR, web, and mobile devices. We believe that we need to create a tool set for you that allows you to just run on any platform, right? So build once, deploy anywhere. And if we look at these 5 features or pillars of Sumerian, and just go one by one and why they are important. The first one, editor and API. As I mentioned on the previous slide, it's great for beginners, but we don't want to discourage seasoned developers that just want to go in and write code. They want to use APIs. They just want to get things done. They do not need to spend, time clicking, dragging, resizing, etc. But then we also have a beautiful visual editor that you do not need to install. Just launch a console, you go in, it just works. Multi-platform, right? As I mentioned, build once, deploy anywhere. With AR/VR, there is this interesting thing, if you will, where the development is not only long horizontally, because you have so many layers of things you need to do, obtain hardware, install SDKs, design something, release something, then you have app store, so there is, a loop there. There is, in entire publishing, there is lots of step itself. But it's also, so that's that horizontal part, but it's also vertically super, super difficult. If you think about all the platforms, Oculus, Vive, Daydream, web, you might want to display your applications as a fallback so they work on web as well. And mobile devices, right? ARKit, ARCore. So it's a problem that is horizontally difficult and also vertically very difficult. And we're trying to address that with that second point. The third and the most important point on this slide is integrations, and we'll drill into that point more in the next couple of slides. But the short version of it is we do not believe that you should just be using augmented virtual reality in isolation. We believe that you should be plugging our other services and actually build a value around the product besides being just able to show beautiful renders and animations. And we have tools there, whether that's machine learning, IoT database, storage, compute. We would love to see if you can integrate blockchain, whatever you want to see and make it happen. We would love to see and discuss with you, work with you on that. Then global. Here, we realize that distribution of AR/VR is actually fairly difficult because these assets can be fairly large. We do know that 5G is coming, but it's not here yet. And we want to make sure that, you can distribute your applications without worrying that your customers would feel it prohibitive to be using those. Underneath Sumerian, we run CloudFront, so we are able to distribute any of your scenes globally very quickly. It's definitely a benefit to think about. And last but not the least, the asset library, right? We do realize that not everyone is a 3D artist, and a lot of our customers are discouraged to even start because they say, well, AR, VR, that means that we should have models, right? We should have some kind of collateral that we can start sticking into our scenes. We give you a catalog of free assets to get you started. So you can maybe do a proof of concept or an example to your leadership without actually having to acquire any 3D assets. So let's now talk about integrations. I'm sure you guys know we have now more than 170 services as of this month. Several of them are really enablers for digital twins. We'll talk about them. We'll go and spend a bit of time talking about a couple of them there. But the important thing is Sumerian can interact with any AWS service that supports our JavaScript SDK. Sumerian actually, under the bonnet, is an engine that runs on JavaScript. So it's easy for you to wire any service that would support SDK. And here are just a couple of examples, right? SageMaker for reinforcement learning. And I'll explain what that means in a couple of slides. Lex for interfaces. If you realize that when you have a headset on, suddenly you just don't have your keyboard and mouse, the interactions become a bit harder. So having a voice bot and conversation is much easier. DynamoDB as a database, if you need to just persist some state. Maybe you want to coordinate your experience if you have a co-presence of multiple actors in the scenes. And then the most important service on this slide is actually IoT Core, right? That's that bridge between that physical, between that original, and between that digital and virtual twin. But of course, as I mentioned, hundreds of more. S3 for storage and loading, maybe your 2D assets into scenes. Recognition for, recognizing images and understanding what's in there. Lambda as an extension arm, as a serverless compute, managed serverless compute that allows you to reach any other service internally or externally of AWS. So let's start with the AWS IoT Core. When you just take a look at the diagram, it should be pretty obvious. It sits in between of Sumerian, that pink icon, and your connected device, your original. It is a managed IoT message broker. What it enables and why is it actually so useful here is for a couple of reasons. One is that it's very efficient. Using MQTT as a protocol, if you're IoT experts, means that you'll be able to use a less chatty protocol than HTTP. You're also able to route your messages in ways of topics, so you're saving on data transfer. And then, it's a pops up protocol, so you're saving on effort of polling. But then the other useful thing is you see a snippet of IoT Shadow on your left, and what you're able to see is that it really resembles, in fact, it is a JSON structure, right? So it's fantastic for Sumerian, knowing that Sumerian is also a JavaScript engine. It's very easy to consume, very easy then to act on it. So what is it useful for? Being able to have that state, to share that state between the physical and the digital twin at all times. Coordination of experience, etc. AWS Lambda, that's our managed serverless compute. We realize that customers are starting to be reaching into external systems to enrich their applications. As I said at the beginning, it's not just important to be able to display content, a 3D model beautifully with beautiful shaders and lights and position it perfectly, but also be able to enrich it with the data. Maybe you have an SAP system, some CRM tech where you keep your information. So having a event-driven compute such as Lambda and being able to reach, whether that's your CRM system, ERP systems, whether that's your on-premise server, it's very useful. And as I mentioned, it's an event-driven architecture, and you're able to pass parameters and also sustain context. And it is useful for, as I mentioned, extending AR/VR 3D with, any other system that you might have in your organization. There is also an example snippet of, a Lambda function. It's usually just a very simple, light call that just serves a single purpose, right? And that's that bridge between Sumerian and our AR/VR technology and your other systems and services. Let's go to DynamoDB. It's a managed key-value database. It's providing persistent storage for your applications. So, when we compare that into what you would see on the first slide where we were talking about the IoT Shadow document, and that was just kind of transactional, and it was only keeping that last state. This allows you to have a history, right? So many times you want to replay something that happened in your original, in your digital twin. You want to have almost like a live replay of your machine. This would be a technology to do it. It consists of tables, unique keys. I'm sure some of you might know DynamoDB. Very performant, which is important because IoT and machines and originals are sending a lot of events all the time. So being able to have architecture and infrastructure that can scale and is able to store and access a lot of rows is very important. And as I mentioned, what is it useful for? Either it's a history. It can also be analytics. So once you have your AR/VR experience, how are you able to understand how are your customers using it, right? So being able to store what they're looking at, useful. You see also a diagram and how it sits in relation to Sumerian. You also are able to see our other service AppSync there. So AppSync also does integrate very well with Sumerian, but you can also just consume DynamoDB directly from your Sumerian scenes. And then you can also see on top on a white background, you're able to see what the example of storing an item looks like. Again, pretty straightforward. Final integration that I wanted to mention and I wanted to go through is SageMaker. And you might be asking, well, how does machine learning kind of plug into digital twins? And it's an interesting story. It's an interesting narrative that we developed. There is pretty more use cases that you would see them coming, and those would be anomaly detection or some predictive maintenance. But reinforcement learning is a large one, right? Where we, using SageMaker and using some built-in, libraries in Sumerian. In this case, we are talking about Gym.js. Gym.js is an open AI, open source framework that lets you, it's a training suite that you are able to use from Sumerian. You are able to use Sumerian not as an augmented virtual reality viewer, but actually as a physics engine that helps you to train simulations, right? So Sumerian, because of we support physics and actually PhysX engine, which is de facto standard in gaming industry, you're able to simulate gravity, rigid bodies, colliders, etc. So many of our customers are looking into ways to use Sumerian as the real world, even though it's a virtual one, and test their hypothesis and do some experiments with any physics forces, whether that's gravity, torque, light, and how it actually lands on the surfaces, etc. So a very interesting use case indeed. And once SageMaker is a very familiar tool for data scientists. It is Jupyter notebooks that they are used to use anyway. And once you develop your algorithm, you can deploy it into a managed instance. And you can use that model then in or out of Sumerian as well. In that case of reinforcement learning, that's typically the case. Actually, Sumerian is a training environment. And once the training's done, that model is actually used in the real world. So it's kind of the other way around. So design considerations, what you should be thinking about when you are designing such application. First of all, content. You need to populate your scenes with some content, right? Do you have those assets or do you need to obtain them? Maybe it's you are having a visual artist. Maybe you want to talk to your colleague that works with CAD, on the second floor, and he can help you out. Maybe it is you learning how to create 3D assets, and maybe it's hiring someone externally. But importantly, that can be also 2D assets, and we'll talk about it later. Images, sounds, etc. So assets are essential because at the end of the day, no matter what services you plug in and what machine learning you do, it still should be quite a visual experience and the system. The second consideration is how do you want your experience to be consumed? Do you intend to only display this on VR headsets, or do you want to do AR only? You want to make sure that your users can use it on desktops. Do you want to do a combination of those? Very important to start with that straight from a get-go because it will change the way how you build your application. Do you require any anchoring or precise positioning of the experience? This is applicable mainly to AR, where what you might be wanting to do in AR is to collocate the experience with respect to an object, right? So being able to place objects on solid surfaces or being able to detect an object and anchor something in augmented reality to that object, image, etc. Our capabilities there are growing, and if you have challenges there, talk to us. Collaboration requires synchronization and control that enable interaction. So this point is to do you really want your experiences to be collaborative, right? Do you intend to build something that is going to be used in isolation by one person, or do you want to foresee, other parties to be in the same experience, collaborating, grabbing objects, interacting, walking around, that co-presents, what we call co-present. And then, what other services do you require? So, as I mentioned, AWS is always like a Legos with lots of pieces, and it's good for you to think of, this is visualization, but what can I layer on top, and what services I need before you start building, because again, it's going to change the way how you build. So build, a couple of tips for building before we get to the demo. Start small. We typically see customers worrying too much about models and visuals to start with. You can start with 3D primitives, cubes, toruses, cylinders. They can resemble the object of your original, right? That digital twin doesn't have to be exactly a twin when you're starting, right? It's just that kind of fear that it has to, but it really doesn't. Demonstrate value over the graphics. Mentioned it a couple of times. What is the value of that application besides you just showing, a beautiful render of your industrial machine or of your car? What is that added thing that, without it you wouldn't have? And again, maybe that's training, maybe that's simulation, maybe that's, being able to experience a product in retail, maybe that's, digital twins. And build connected worlds rather than isolated islands. Think of your data lakes. Think of your other systems, your CRM systems, your archives, your factories, Industry 4.0. Think of all the facilities and try to make sure that this is well connected. This system is well connected to everything, because you will be consuming that information. And equally, you will be wanting to distribute that application to other parties so they can embed it in their applications. Understand the original, improve the digital twin. This should be fairly obvious, but virtual reality, the benefit of it is that you can do more than you can do in the real world, right? So don't just replicate what you see, but think of what can you add, whether that's graphical or whether that's data and information. Keep an eye on the volume and complexity. We'll talk about it in lessons learned, but being able to produce fairly small packages and applications is actually great for your distribution because they load faster. And it's also great for your wallet because it costs less in our pricing model. And then test with different humans and devices. There's a lot of factors that matter in testing VR AR applications. The height of a person. A lot of people have motion sickness. A lot of people do have issues with perceiving colors, and they see shapes and ways of their ways of orientation is different. The way how they turn left or right. That's all something that you need to be checking and you need to be testing. Only then you can succeed, because the variety of people is just huge out there. So it's a demo time. I'll try to make sure that my laptop unfortunately went to sleep, so it's loading. So I have a couple of versions of this demo. So this demo was built by, just to give you a bit of context, it was built by our prototyping team in Europe. We wanted to start, showcasing the digital twin vision, and a lot of customers are asking about, how do I do this in VR? How do I do this in AR? What everything I can be plugging in? AWS, show me how to do. Show me an example of that. So first version we can show, and obviously I don't have original. So there is an original version, kind of one-to-one, that you can have out there, so customers can see original, and then they can see a digital twin. So I do not have original here. I will just play with, simulated version of it. We'll give it a minute to load. It's a very simple scene, and it just shows a simple tank, in a space where looks like a factory, right? So we modeled all of this. You can see that models are fairly simple. It does not matter really to showcase the value of it. But you can see, the animations. You can see slowly the tank filling up. You can see, we are playing with colors. We are playing with animation. You can see that we even include, controls, right? We include, knobs and buttons and displays that you would see in the real world. And this is all the design considerations you might want to go through. Do you want to enable your customers to, be able to be pressing buttons in experience and actually interface back? You're also able to see, some of the animations, that's for sure, but you're able to see some actually 2D elements, some of the stickers that show you in real-time data that is coming from IoT. So it doesn't have to all be 3D and it doesn't have to all be spatial, but it can be actually 2D content that displays a value, right? In this case, you would have a really hard time to mount display on every single pipe in your experience in order to understand what your machines are doing if you would be a field engineer, right? So being able to have your machines without any displays or dials or buttons and be able to render all of that on top, saves a lot of time and makes it a really interesting interaction. There's the other demo with the AR. I'm not sure whether it will play nice, and I was thinking how to showcase this to you guys, and it's a bit difficult. So if you see my face for a moment, I'll just open a marker, and you can see that immediately I'm able to pop the entire digital twin from my phone, from a marker. You're able to, experience anywhere, anytime, through. So this is my webcam that is looking, at me from my. So you can see that, these experiences, whether they are for mobile or for desktops, work nearly everywhere. So, whether you want to be using, phones or headsets or mobile or desktops, it doesn't matter. It works everywhere. So that was a short demo to kind of give you a flavor of what we built. It took us a couple of weeks, but it's very simple and demonstrates how we are taking this to our customers, what we're showing them. Lessons learned, right? If you would be to build this, and this is all we learned building these prototypes, over and over. The first one is, polygons and very complicated models are your enemies, right? Again, for the reasons of performance and also for the cost reasons and for distributing our application, for customers that, might have 4G on their phones and they actually have to pay for that data, it's good to keep those models small. And, by being clever around, how you use textures, sometimes you wouldn't even know that is, a low polygonal model. It looks really great when you incorporate all the lights and AGR and skyboxes around, but you're keeping your bundle small. Then colors and shapes and animations are your friend. So if you go to a bathroom, you're washing your hands, and you see that you can use red for hot water and blue for cold water. Those are mental models that we as humans developed for so long. And we can be using that in this very visual way in these experiences. So instead of giving you a figure and not letting you know whether, is it Fahrenheit, Celsius, Kelvin, what's that temperature, giving you a shade of color and giving you, more visual feedback and understanding makes that experience much more enjoyable to use and actually provides value faster. Our brains just kind of snap and learn faster there. This is Christine, by the way. She's our Sumerian host. I didn't talk about hosts today because it's not so relevant in the context of digital twins. But what you can see is don't include it all, right? What's important is that when we were developing her, she's a assistant with a face, right? And primarily, you will be looking at her like that. You'll be looking at her from outside. You're not going to be zooming and clipping her head in half and looking whether she has a brain, right? That is not the value and the information we want to forward onto you, right? So if you have a scene that is fixed to one location and you cannot even move, and you see a fridge in front of you, there's no point of modeling that fridge from back, right? Because there's never going to be a reason to go around or a way to go around and actually look at it, right? So, if you can save some time and be clever about what you include and what you don't, that makes it so much faster for you to develop. And that, again, comes back to maybe feedback loop closes at the design there. Use physics. As I mentioned, we are now enabling our customers to use PhysX engine. That is, again, de facto the standard in games. Very powerful, very precise in terms of forces, gravity, etc. We have this feature in, and especially in a digital twin scenario, right? You want that twin to behave the same as physical, and physical definitely adheres to motion, to gravity, to torque, etc. So you want to make sure that you have that, you are covered there, and you're using all those features, and you're making it as lifelike as possible. Screen aspect ratios matter here because VR is 360 and you can be looking literally everywhere. Sometimes you just don't realize that the way you design your application makes it impractical to be consumed on some type of device. So here you can see that if I would have my phone in a portrait, I would be not able to see those lights on the right and left, right? So either make a conscious decision for what devices you are building for, or make sure that you're positioning your experience the way that it can be enjoyed on all supported devices and hardware. And we really support a range, as I mentioned in a couple of slides ago. Another point, devices should not matter. Yeah, that again, just a repeat of works on any platform. If you want to have it on all platforms, it's the same process, just tweaking for individual small changes and differences there. 2D is fine too, and this is what we constantly have to remind not only our customers but ourselves too. There is no problem of you using 2D content in VR, AR experiences. You would look at it normally as you would look at 2D content in the real world, right? So first of all, what's important to remember is if you don't include it, right, you're losing that ability. You already have so many of those assets. You already have all those pictures. Maybe you don't have a model. If you would go to search engine today and you would search for a tree, you would definitely find more pictures of tree than you would find 3D models of tree, right? So there's a lot of content out there that is 2D, sounds as well, and text as well. That's a medium how we also are receiving any information. So why don't we include it, no matter that this is an AR/VR enabled application? And then controls are yours to invent. So, a couple of years ago when I got headset first time on my head, I wasn't sure suddenly what to do, where to look, and how to interact with the environment. Remember, your users yet do not have fingers at their disposal, or they are not able to use a keyboard and mouse. How are you going to enable them to be existing in that experience, right? The only thing they can do is turning their heads around, right? So being able to use controllers for teleportation and moving around the scene, or being able to have a grab ability where you can just take an object and move it to some other surface. Very useful. Those controls are out there and we support them. But also our hosts, right? Don't be mistaken, they are actually not only there to look cool and have our poly integrated and being able to do gestures and wave at you, but really they are actually a way of controlling the scene, right? They are your guides in that experience, or they just keep you company, right? They can navigate you right way and tell you what to do once your headset is on, and you feel a little bit out of control because there is nothing for you to hold in terms of a keyboard. Interface back, right? Again, this is something that we see all the time. Customers like to think that data always travels from the original to the twin, but they forget that the data can be traveling from twin to original, right? So, that light switch can actually be functioning the other way around too. So you can be switching light switch in a real world, and then it flips the switch in a virtual reality, but the other way around, or in 3D as well. It's a powerful control. It's actually, you are creating a future dashboards for any type of industrial equipment. And what's great about that, you can render as many buttons, as many knobs, dials, whatever else as you want. And then things can change, right? in the real world, we are always limited by time, and we are in a slice of time. In this scenario, right, by using technology like Dynamo, as I mentioned, you can be recording the entire history of your machine or your digital twin, and then replaying it, playing it from back to front, playing it at 2x time, stopping, reviewing the content, playing with it, and actually iterating on your next version of your product or next version of your machine or your next project, really. It's a learning experience, and you are able to control everything. Equally, to save space, you might be lazy loading some of the assets and, destroy them when you don't need them and load them when you need them, etc. So those are all the things that, just remember, this is really a canvas in 3D that you can just be changing anytime. Collaboration will be big. We can sense that this is coming, where our customers say, well, this is great when I have, one person and they are having a headset or they are having a phone, but how do we enable teams to work together? Or, how do we, in training, you have a mentor and a mentee, or a teacher and a pupil, right? How do you create that, co-presence? And we can see that this is going to be a huge topic, and we would love to see what you guys can do. And so we welcome any of your projects to use this, and we think it's going to be very powerful. We have all the technology and all the services that will enable you to do that. Keep your bundles lean. As I mentioned, it's good to always be taking a look at your Sumerian scene, how big it is, how many megabytes, what is the frame rate, etc. Once you drop beyond certain frame rate, people get sick. So having and being able to just always continuously watching and iterating on your scenes is very, very important. And yeah, we invite you to. And we want to make sure that you have all this info, and it also saves your money at the end of the day, because the way how we build for Sumerian and our other services, which are usage-based. Last 2 points that I have here is learn from fractals. What that means is a lot of 3D models are just, even in reality, generated from itself, right? So if you think about a tree, always kind of splits in half, and then it splits in half, and then it splits in half. Or if you think about the building, right, it's always a box that just happens to have windows and doors and a roof and certain way of looking. Skyscrapers are a great example of that. So you don't need to actually model everything. You can model something that is reasonably versatile, and using code and using our other services, having some table of properties and being able to apply that across different buildings. Suddenly you can have an entire city of 100 buildings that look a little bit different, and they actually feel like city, even though you didn't really model 100 buildings. You only had one, and you were able to change it using code, clone it 100 times, position it, and create that environment there. Similar with trees, similar with many objects actually in the real world. And then final point is just kind of review of today's talk is connect the dots, right? We want you to bring other services to Sumerian. We do not want you to just think of one component. We want you to build a system, an architecture of components that actually bring value to the visual. There's a call to action for you guys. There's a couple of links for you to learn. There's our documentation and also tutorials. Tutorials are so simple, you can start with literally zero knowledge. I can guarantee it, because that's how and a couple of my colleagues started as well. Being able to communicate with our service team was never easier. We actually set up a Slack where our SDEs and software development managers are there. So you can you can literally write them a DM and discuss with them what, and complain or give them like something for improvement or ideas and share, and also share. We are always interested to hear about your projects and share those links, share those projects, so we can learn and we can feature some of them in our tutorials or in our demos. And then build. There are 2 links that help you to actually build digital twin, right? Those services that I mentioned, IoT and Sumerian. in there, some Lambda in there, DynamoDB, etc. So those tooling should be, helpful for you to, to start. We just announced a book a couple of days ago, so it's available for you. It's learning by tutorials, learning by doing. There is a QR code as well for you to take a look. Again, the important point is you do not need to be a programmer or 3D designer to start, right? So it's that resource that should, propel you and help you to just feel confident to start. It's a great read. I highly recommend that. Q&A, we'll get to Q&A in a minute, and that was it, guys. Thank you very much. I'm going to hang out for 10 more minutes here, and then I'm going to be outside of the room, but please, any questions from you? Sure.
Can you import, or are there any importing tools built in for Revit or SketchUp or any of the
So the question is, are there any tools for importing from Google SketchUp or CAD tools, etc.? So we have a set of formats that we do support. Now, how you're going to get to those formats, it's up to you. You do need to use some of tooling that will help you. Now, OBJ or FBX are quite very popular formats that, you should be able to export from a lot of different tools. Correct. So you pre-export it to supported format, and then we, inside of Sumerian, we can read it. Please. The question is whether it is available in all regions. As far as I know, it is available in all of our regions at the moment. Yeah. Please.
Do we have programmatic access to pixels, texture pixels at the pixel level?
So the question is whether we have access to the pixel level in terms of programmatic access. For the most part, everything you can access through the code, right? So every layer of the 3D model, provided it's layered and it has multiple layers, you can access. You can be changing colors, diffusing materials, etc. You can be actually loading textures as well on your own. It requires, the more you want to go into the depth of engine, the more you need to write of your own code, but it's absolutely possible. Yes. Oh, sorry. So the question is there any emulator to emulate any of the devices that this might be running on? In terms of VR headsets, no. The answer is no. We do not have a headset, service that would emulate headsets. Anything else you can simulate. AWS Device Farm lets you emulate, any type of phone with any version of iOS or Android. In terms of web, there's frameworks like Selenium and others that help you to test applications as you would conventionally test.
Is there any integration with geospatial data, like being able to put objects in a certain place on here?
So the question is whether we support geospatial information and how we would work typically with this. So Sumerian has its own coordinates, if I call it that. So there would need to be a mapping question, mapping function that you would write that would, then be in respect to, latitude, longitude. But absolutely you can do that. So you could be loading Mapbox or some kind of map, overlaying it on a plane, and then placing objects with respect, where you need to do. Yeah. Anything else?
Can you do any measurements or real-world things in the simulated environment?
So the question is whether you can do any measurements or whether you can do any. As I mentioned, the Sumerian at this point have its own coordination system, but it's just again a case of you, specifying what that means for you, right? So you need to have again a function that just translates, whatever your Yes, it's a scaling function. Yes, correct. Correct. Please.
Is there a repo that you can access that has more scene templates on there? So I know there's one for the TV picture and everything. But are there more other scenes that you can access?
Yes. So the question is, are there any more templates or pre-start or pre-built scenes that you can be using? We do have a couple of them. We do now have a product configurator, for instance. So if you would have making a custom skateboard, for instance, and wanting to just have a quick start and build it faster, we have a template that gets you started. We have a template for augmented reality. We have a template that has some professional lighting around, so we help you to position lights the right way. So there is a bunch of them that should help you. There's also, I think, some barista or some kind of concierge pre-built template as well for you to start building. Yeah.
Where can I find it?
So where can you find it? You can find all these templates when you go into the console. You will be able to see a bunch of them at the splash screen. And then, a lot of them we also share on a GitHub, or, you will be able to find them scattered around. Every scene you create, you're able to export, and basically what it becomes is a template that then you can reuse somewhere else. Yes?
Why didn't they name Christine Alexa?
Why? The question, I do not know, but I believe that there's just a conflict of, people will probably be a bit, yeah. I think the story goes that one of the developers on Sumerian was named Christine. Okay, there's no more questions. Thank you guys. Appreciate it.